And now we leave the floor for R Racinskas. You don't need any presentation either in this group, so please, floor is yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for having stayed here for the 2 lengthy days of our conference. Let me make a general overview and skim over what we've talked today. I do agree and welcome your proposals and wishes. Every good idea is as meaningful as it in the sense that it is implemented. So let me speak about the practical steps that are necessary in addressing the issues of historical justice. We have talked a lot about the challenges, and I will not deliberate on that in a greater detail, but let me highlight the problems which we see and talk about the ways to address them. We have identified that there are objective and subjective reasons why there is no united history of Europe. There are several different narratives. As Professor Landsbergis mentioned, the history is one, but the memories are varying, and some are modeled consciously and with a certain guideline in mind, and some were formulated just on themselves. So we lack the objective knowledge and objective facts. If we want to speak about a single united European history, and if we want our memories to be incorporated into the European history, we need to be curious about the history of nations of other European countries. The totalitarian regimes, due to their differing natures, created impacts of varying measure on various nations and states. This is why those differing views on the past and the history were shaped. Professor Landsbergis was right in mentioning that history is intertwined with policy and it's politicized. This is not a coincidence, and especially the history of modern times is being politicized. History is the policy of yesterday, and the policy of today will become history tomorrow. Some opponents say that our efforts to make the crimes of the Soviet regime public and make them known to European nations, they say that this is politicization of history. History is politicized by now. We want to depoliticize it, so that there are no distinctions between the crimes and the victims, so that all crimes are clearly spoken about and enumerated. All crimes should be investigated and assessed. We can see that there are differing standards. Some standards are hidden and undeclared. Other standards are made public. If, let's say, a crime is not conventionally attributed to genocide, it seems that it is less important. Professor Sužiedėlis, in his presentation and in his comment to Delphi, has been right in saying that from the moral and ethical point of view, it doesn't matter whether crimes are called genocide or not. They are crimes anyway. We talked about this concept of genocide yesterday. I will not cover that today. the Russian factors of importance, there are two aspects to it. The collective conscience is being shaped by Russia by promoting the image of the great patriotic war. This war brought along a lot of pain and many victims. Even so, Russia is using this to shape an ideologically based view on the war. The totalitarian regime is being highlighted and it's told that the totalitarian regime won in the war, and the goal they had is more important than the means. It justifies the means. So they justify the crimes committed by Stalin. This is an important part of the foreign policy of Russia, just as important as the oil policy and other issues. Russia is trying to tell European countries what positions on history they should take. In ethical terms, I don't understand why this is being done, but the democratic Europe often connives with Russia. Today we talked about the lack of consistency in the post-Soviet countries. We named the problems. We said that the cases in court are too lengthy and become ridiculous. There is a lack of assessment on the collaboration with the totalitarian regimes. We can see documents and we can even see a bridge in Vilnius which has some abstract sculptures to the workers, and a sculpture to Petras Cvirka is a monument which commemorates Mr. Cvirka as an important personality in Lithuania, even though he was not a genius, not a good writer, but because he promoted the ideas of Stalin in Lithuania. We still have this monument in Vilnius, and it is not a good example for our young generation. We have similar problems in all post-Soviet countries. If we can't solve these issues in our countries, it's hardly reasonable to expect that we will be able to change the mode of thinking in Europe. What should we do? How should we act? First of all, political will is of importance. What I see here is not just declarations and words. Resources and actions are needed. Political will should be translated into financial and human resources. We lack that, both in Europe and in Lithuanian national level. As for practical steps, in order to be able to exchange our views with our partners in Europe, we need to consistently and comprehensively study the knowledge on the past in our society. So far, we have been operating on the basis of data which has not been sufficiently clarified, and we need a Eurobarometer study, for instance. Lithuania will preside over the Council of the European Union. I hope that during the presidency we will take certain steps to address these issues. As for information and availability of information, can we talk about that if the key archives are not accessible? There are no European archives that are inaccessible, but in the former Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, the archives are inaccessible. These archives should be part of the cultural heritage of Europe. They should have the relevant status and be opened. They should be protected, and access should be provided to the wider society, not just to researchers. We had memories from the victims, and the preservation of the life history and testimonies is of crucial importance. Collection of these testimonies on the national and European level should be made. These memories should be collected, and access to people, to societies, and to local communities, as well as to researchers, should be provided. We should learn from the Jewish nation. They collect a lot of testimonials. And there's a huge archive in Los Angeles. The Shoah Foundation has collected thousands of testimonies from witnesses. So you can even have a search engine and look for the people, for the surnames, for the places. We should have a European project so that the European history can be collected and testimonies are collected. If we don't do this, we will not be able to do that later, because people are dying, after all. As for communication, we have to be able to present our ideas and send our message. It's important to make our message heard. As for several areas, we need institutional instruments. Our platform as a platform of NGOs does a lot of important work. Even so, in order to send a very strong signal to Europe, we need intergovernmental forum where states clearly demonstrate their commitment and contribute to those European values. Maybe this forum shouldn't include the 27 or 28 countries immediately, but at least the countries which are committed to that could join the forum, and this would be a step forward. Back in 2008, in European debates, it was mentioned that a foundation is necessary because the work we're talking about necessitates resources. We need to collect these resources and to have a source of funding. Many European institutions exist. There are research institutes and museums. A European Institute on communist crimes could be established. Why not? We would have specific persons and specific commitment of this institute. European bureaucratic structures are able to do this, once they have the clear guidelines. So we should give a guideline and let these people do their work. The next step would be memorialization. There are some initiatives to do that. There should be a museum, a European museum should be established. And European museums should be established in very visible places, let's say Brussels or Strasbourg. This museum should be established, not just one museum. There should be many museums in all European capitals. The Holocaust history is reflected in many European capitals, so the other side of European history should be also reflected in all European capitals. We can also speak about the commemorative days, commemoration days. They are of key importance. I commend the 23rd of August as the European Day of Victims of Totalitarian Regimes. There could be and should be more days like that, not just at the European but also at national level. Today we tried to make the first steps towards the introduction of these days of commemoration into Lithuanian life. On the 14th of June, we remember the first deportations from Lithuania, but the deportation waves of 1948, 1949 and 51 are just as important as this one, and the Vesna operation is also of importance. Plaques and commemorative memorials, as well as names of streets after the heroes of the nation, are good ways to remember the past. It's quite debatable whether Salomėja Nėris, a Lithuanian writer who supported the communist regime, is a good person to commemorate. I don't mean that her books should be banned, but it's better. Wouldn't it be a better idea to call the schools by the names of partisans or the names of the writers of the nations? Exhibitions, films, and books should be an important part in the memorialization context. The film entitled The Soviet Fairy Tale of the Soviet Story has won more hearts in Europe than any book or anything else. We should invest into films like Katyn by Andrzej Wajda. We have so far very few examples, and we should work in that direction. We covered the legal instruments for some time.
5 minutes.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We covered those processes, and there was an impetus after the European debate on the framework decision on the criminalization of the denial of the Holocaust. Lithuania and other countries said that the denial of other crimes should also be criminalized, and we should continue our work in that direction. We should continue our debate. Lithuania has done this, other states have done this. I think this should become a European form, a norm and standard. When Prince Harris goes to a party with a Nazi symbol, this becomes a media scandal in Europe. But when publicly the victims of Soviet regime are denigrated, and there's a complacency towards the perpetrators. There are no scandals, and this is wrong. We should be principled. We should adopt a principled attitude to that. This shouldn't be accepted as a form of liberalism. Legal assessment is important. We should find ways to ensure legal assessment. The platform has recently aired an idea to establish a specialized tribunal. This would be a natural matter. If there are separate tribunals for the crimes in Yugoslavia or Rwanda, why not a tribunal for the investigation into crimes by the Soviet communist regime? Education. We talked about education a lot today, and this is fundamental. We should focus our attention to this issue. This is not a subject of one presentation, this is a subject of conferences and lengthy debates. How do we ensure education? Education is not a pan-European affair, it's a national affair. It's a matter of national parliaments, but still we can provide recommendations on the preparation of guidelines and methodologies as to how the history of victims of Soviet regime could be presented. So these recommendations are a good way to ensure better education. Good books and films should be disseminated both in Lithuania and abroad, where the information is lacking on that. Finally, our own homework. In this case, I am referring not to our assessment of the Soviet past and heroes and anti-heroes of the Soviet past. Some say, let's forget what people did during the Soviet times, let's see what he did in the independent Lithuania. This is something I can't understand nor justify. When the Zionist movement of the Reformation was being formed and shaped, let's say a person starts cooperating with the KGB in any way, and then this person takes an important position in the state, and people say, let's see what he did in the independent Lithuania. This is opportunism. These people will serve any government. It's unfortunate that dissidents and those who suffered from the Soviet regime lived under difficult conditions, were marginalized in the Soviet society, and I feel for them because in the independent Lithuania they are marginalized again. They are called various names. This is unacceptable. This should not be the case. As for homework, we heard many ideas today which created some debate in our audience. We should see that in Lithuania the entire community of Jews was exterminated, and some citizens of Lithuania were involved. We have to understand that. If we need to bring information to the West on what happened on this side of the Iron Curtain, what is our own homework is to understand that the loss of Jews in Lithuania is not the loss of Jews alone. This is the tragedy of our nation, of our country, of our state. This is our intellectual loss and loss of human life. As soon as we realize that and accept this attitude to genocide, we will be understood better and we will be heard in Europe. Thank you. These are the contact information about our Commission. As an organizer of this event, I wish to thank our keynote speakers for their presentations, for their time. I'm thankful to the participants of the forum for their ideas. I'm thankful to my colleagues, Ingrida, Thomas and Danute, as well as others who helped me organize this forum. I'm thankful to the Seimas and Office of the Seimas, the staff of the office, who did their utmost to the effect that our work here would be comfortable, and I'm thankful to our interpreters, without whom we still cannot work out and talk in one language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronaldas. We are not done yet. I will open up the floor for a little discussion now at the end, as we have in the program. Before that, I will thank you also, Ronaldas, for this agenda or this plan you have for future work. The only thing we need now is a big bag of money to get started. The knowledge is here, the capacity with personnel is here, but in order to do the running in corridors in Brussels and Strasbourg, we need to buy airplane tickets. In order to have lunches with a lot of journalists, and it takes 2-3 years to get relations that journalists may write something that is not only in disfavor of us. To discuss it takes some money, and of course all kinds of meetings and events where we involve the public have to be financed. So therefore your idea of making an intergovernmental organization is very good. We actually had this idea from the beginning when we founded the platform, but it was too complicated to do it at that time. But I think on the basis of the platform it can be started very soon, but then it is necessary that Lithuania takes the initiative during the chairmanship when it comes to how to deal with this, so that we could have a coalition of willing within the platform and finally at the end make it intergovernmental. I think in some countries it's almost impossible because it has to be ratified by parliaments before it comes into effect. In other countries it's easier. Easier to, I believe, is to start with the court or the tribunal or whatever we want to call it. The lawyers are investigating how it could be set up, but that should definitely be set up by those coalition of willing, a few countries that start with it. But the ultimate goal is, of course, that this should be a natural part of maybe the Fundamental Rights Agency. I would love to see the platform be part of the European Union's Fundamental Rights Agency, and then we're all in the system. So this is something we really